Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking near-death experience with the host of the Let's Talk Life Design podcast, Kirsty Salisbury. Kirsty is a firm believer that we can all design our future regardless of our circumstances. Her passion comes from her traumatic life-changing event when aged 12 she was left paralysed on her left side due to a rare brain malformation. It turned her world upside down. Even at such a young age, Kirsty decided that this major life event would never define or limit her, and she would in fact thrive. And there started what she calls her second life, one in which she aims to live consciously, filled with purpose and gratitude. During her recovery, Kirsty learnt to walk again, how to move her arm, then how to skip and jump, and now the sky is the limit. Whilst every single day she is reminded of her journey, she is truly grateful for her experience and continues to use the lessons she has learnt to push life's boundaries. Kirsty is a speaker, podcaster and a coach who works with her clients on eliminating regret, living on purpose and removing the fear of death. She believes that whilst hardship can be excruciating and challenging, it can also be a gift and something to help us take our life to the next level. Join us today as we discuss addressing and recovering from grief, pain and loss, by facing the dark moments, dealing with negative thoughts and acknowledging the feelings. We are so pleased to welcome Kirsty Salisbury. Morning Kirsty, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, it is great to be here.
How are you today?
I'm good, it's a sunny bright day, I'm feeling good. So yeah, excited to be here as well to chat to you.
Great. As always, all of our listeners have got a story to tell. They've all faced adversity, they've all faced suffering, and yours started when you were 12 years old. Can you take us back to that and tell us what happened to you?
Yeah, sure. So I was just your happy average kid. Nothing in my life was very exciting. I was just going through life, going through the motions, and I was a competitive gymnast at the time. And I spent pretty much all of my time training because I had very big goals about competing and getting to quite a high level in gymnastics. Cutting a really long story short, a very long story, I hit my head one day on the bars. I was at school at the time, hit my head, and then within about 48 hours, I was starting to feel quite lethargic, quite tired. One thing led to another. Didn't think too much of it still at this time, but what happened is I ended up being rushed off to the hospital. Had what we call an AVM on my brain, which is an arterial venous malformation. And what was happening there, we never know whether it was the hit to the head that actually triggered this, but I had a malformation in my brain, which meant that the blood flow wasn't able to flow correctly, pressure built up, I ended up having a brain hemorrhage, and then I was completely paralysed down one side of my body. So 12 years old, I went from being a very fit, athletic, competitive type of person to literally in an instant someone who became dependent on everybody else for every single thing in my life, everything you can think of. And they rushed me into the hospital. I had emergency brain surgery. I died on the operating table, so they had to resuscitate me. I flatlined. They brought me back. I had this beautiful experience, quite a brief one, but had this experience. I then flatlined again, so they had to bring me back again. And it was at that point that they said, hey, this surgery is probably not going to be the best thing. Let's just get her stable. So they got me stable. I woke up in a critical care unit quite a few days later, tubes everywhere, and a whole new life ahead of me. So that was when, I guess that was my main moment in life where everything fell apart. And yeah, I was still very young. Like I said, I was only 12 years old. I just had my 12th birthday. So at this point, I didn't have any set ideas on life. I didn't have any firm beliefs around anything. But this incident, let's say it fast-tracked quite a lot of that stuff. So suddenly I had quite a lot to say, quite a lot of opinions. I became very determined that this would never hold me back in life. So I came back with what I would say is quite a strong sense of purpose, of feeling like I had work to do. I had something very significant to do, because if I didn't, then why was I back? Why didn't I stay dead on that operating table? And so, yeah, that's where it all really started. I had this beautiful surgical scar. I was paralysed down one side of my body and really just didn't know what the rest of my life could look like.
Well, Kirsty, what a story. And I know listeners will be listening to what you've got to say and resonating in the sense that, as Jo said earlier, we've all got a story to tell. And whether you're listening to this and you're facing divorce, loss of a career, you're suffering depression, anxiety through lockdown, whatever your circumstances, I know that many listeners will relate to a tragic circumstance or a trigger where trauma has entered your life. But yet what seems incredible is that you're such a positive person. You're not telling this story from a place of victimhood. You're empowered, you're enthusiastic about life now. But how do you do that? You say that in the circumstances that you faced, you knew that you were going to turn your life around. It wasn't going to hold you back. But other people, it does hold them back. So what does it take to be able to say, this is not going to stop me moving forward? For listeners today who are in a place that's dark right now, they're facing something severe, they're in trauma, adversity or conflict. How can you get to the place where you can have that positive attitude and say, this is not going to stop me, it's not going to hold me back?
And that's a really interesting question, because it wasn't straight off the bat that I was happy and positive. I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of negative thoughts. I was really questioning, why did this happen to me? This is so unfair. I so strongly believe that there's a time for going through what we're going through, that we can't just suddenly, something's happened, we're in the midst of that crisis moment, but let's pretend it's all positive. Let's pretend we're having the time of our lives and we're loving it, and let's move on. That just creates problems further down the track, or what I believe creates problems further down the track. So it's about connecting with where we are, acknowledging what we're doing, what we're going through, and then what can we do about it? So I knew I'd turn my life around. They had aborted my surgery, so we still hadn't fixed the problem. I was what we called a walking time bomb. I could go off at any point. There was a lot of stuff on a daily basis, and I know when we go through relationship breakups and we go through crisis moments, you just mentioned a whole lot of them. It's not a one thing event. It doesn't just happen and then it's done. There's always compounding issues before and after. It's a process. It builds up, has its moment, and then there's the after effects of that as well. So in those moments, I would say just understanding that things can change. Understanding that things might be really dark, where we just can't see any future going forward. We can't understand how we're going to get out of this. But knowing that as time goes on and as we can adjust very, very slightly, and this is a huge thing that I talk about, it's just the smallest changes in our lifestyle, then things can start to open up. And sometimes the smallest things become the biggest things in our lives. So it's really just understanding that this situation will change over time.
Yeah, I think it's a really important message, because basically what you're saying is you've got to feel the grief, you've got to feel the pain, you've got to go to them depths, because there's actually no way to recover unless you've addressed that. And I think we are so good at trying to sweep things under the carpet, because that pain is so painful and so raw. It's often very, very confronting. But it's within the pain is when the changes happen, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Because if we run away from what we're going through, it's just going to resurface later. It's going to be more difficult to deal with later. There's going to be more to it. So if we can acknowledge it and go through it and understand that this is what's happening, this is where I'm at right now, but it's not always going to be this dark, or it's not always going to be exactly how it is now. And I think that's where we can turn it around from feeling like a victim to somebody who's a little bit more in charge of what the future is going to look like, regardless of what's happening to us right now.
What does it actually look like to go through it, in terms of how do we manage day to day when we actually can't cope with the pain? Because I know that for me personally, when I was in circumstances similar to yours, I was in my darkest moment. I went to the fridge to eat. I was very spiritual, so I just turned to the Bible, but I needed something to get me through it. And whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's shopping addiction, whether it's sex, whatever comforts us in that moment, is it okay to go to those props to get through it? Do we need something to get through it? Or is it a question of just sitting in the pain? What does it mean to journey through it?
And I think it's going to mean different things for different people, to be fair. I think what I talk about is living consciously. So coming back and connecting with our moments, connecting with what we're going through, how we're feeling. So For me, my body didn't work, but my brain was very alert. I did have a brain injury, but my mind was very active. So I was able to spend a lot of time thinking, even though I couldn't move my body well. Then I think for other people, perhaps their mind's not working so well, but they could move their body. So it's finding what is the little thing that I could do. And rather than jumping in and finding something else to soothe that and to fill that hole that's not going to be great for us in the future, really just acknowledging the moment. So maybe that looks like journaling, maybe that's reaching out, connecting with someone, maybe it's spending time chatting to a professional or a counsellor, or finding a bit of support around us. There are so many things, and it's very easy, like you say, to go to the fridge and the fridge becomes the friend. But if we're living consciously and connecting to our moments and understanding why we do the things that we do, we can also understand that the future is going to look how we've built it. So the things that we're putting into our life compound to the point where that is what we have in the future. Just like if you're saving money, if you save your cents, you get your dollars. If you save your dollars, you get more dollars, and you get to the point where you want to be at. If we are, whatever it is that we're putting into our life, if we understand the compound theory that everything is building what we're going to have in the future, then we can understand how our moments are working better. So it's about picking out what are the things that are going to help me in my future. So is that journaling? Is that talking to somebody? Is that just making sure that I get enough water in my body? Sometimes we think we need to reach out for some great big magic pill, some big thing that's going to make a huge difference. But like I said earlier, it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference if we keep compounding. So yeah, really good question. It's going to be the same for everyone. And we are going to have those moments where we go to the fridge and we eat everything on every shelf. We're going to have the moments where we pick up a bottle and it's going to be empty by the end of the night. This is going to happen because this is how we cope. This is what we do. But it's when we're doing things like that, they're going to have a negative effect on our future when we're doing those things time and time again. Yeah. We will know that that's happening because we're connecting with our current moments. So I hope that that's making sense, but it's all about that compounding theory. What we're feeding ourselves, what we're feeding our life is what we're going to have in the future. So choosing those things wisely, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, because, we're all into the big theory of living 80% and 20%. So if you can do really good things for yourself 80% of the time, the other 20% isn't going to have such a huge impact. However, if it's the other way round, if you are reaching for the bottle and if you are going to the fridge or whatever it is, over exercising or gambling addiction, whatever it is, if you're doing that 80% of the time, well, the detriment to your life is going to be huge, isn't it? So it's having the balance. As you say, there is always going to be the odd time when you go back into something like, as you say, have a glass of wine or a cake or a bar of chocolate, and that's okay if it's here and there. It's not going to have that huge compound effect if it is just here and there. However, if it's each and every day and every moment of every day, whether it's negative thought patterns or addictions of some sort, then as you say, it's the compound effect on top of each other. If we put it into really simplistic terms, if people all of a sudden look at themselves one day in the mirror and they've gained 10, 20 kilos, but it didn't just appear, did it? It happened over time. Like 1 kilo happened, which wasn't too bad. Then another one came on, then they found they had a little muffin top, and then they just carried on eating. Whereas if they'd gone backwards a little bit, it wouldn't have happened, and the 20 kgs wouldn't have happened. We have to start living more mindfully.
Totally. That's that conscious connection to what we're doing, what our decisions are. And then I think also it's focusing on some of the positive things. So we've talked quite a bit about the negative aspects, but what are the things that give us some joy? And I know in the depths of crisis, not very much gives us joy. But what is that one thing? And then adding a little bit more of that into our life, and then a little bit more. And as we start to build more of the positives in, there becomes less room for some of those negative things. So I think, it's different for everybody. Everybody's going through different experiences, different emotions, different depths of emotions and things like that. But understanding whatever we put into our life is what we have in our future. And like you said, the weight gain, it didn't just happen overnight. If we're consciously connected to our moments and our choices, we would have understood when we're standing at the fridge eating or eating out in restaurants too much or whatever it is that we've done to get to that point. We would understand that process is taking place.
And Kirsty, you mentioned the word choice. I think lots of people, when they're suffering, feel a victim to their circumstances. Certainly I did, and it's very easy to feel as though, woe is me, and why is this all happening to me? And when one bad thing happens, often you find lots of bad things happen to you, and you go in this downward spiral. But I think when you talk about the word choice, it's really important to understand we do all have choice, and we can choose our future, as you say. But how amazing to think we can also reprogram our thought patterns. And I love it that you talk about gratitude, because when you're in Thanksgiving and gratitude and you choose to find the positive things and you choose to focus on them and you choose to speak them out, or even choose to journal them, you talk about keeping a diary, journal those positive thought patterns, and we're retraining our mind. And sometimes in that place of darkness and hopelessness is the moment when you realize, gosh, I can actually program my future. I can create my future. Whereas a lot of people without a trigger in their life, or a place of darkness or suffering or adversity or conflict, can journey through life and journey into circumstances that come their way and drift. But actually, this could be a critical turning point where you realize, I can actually recreate my future. I can create whatever I want because I can reprogram my thoughts. I can start to live in gratitude. That's where you start to reprogram your thoughts and recreate what you want for your future, as opposed to drifting into it.
Definitely. And I'm a huge fan of gratitude, because when we are in that dark place, it can be so hard to find something that we have gratitude for. What is one single good thing? And we might, people say, well, you're alive and breathing. For some of us in those crisis moments, that's not necessarily a positive thing. We would rather be on the other side of that than going through what we're going through. So people who lose people and they experience a sudden death or something like that, and I've been there too, in those moments, it's about remembering some of the good times rather than right now, life is good. Right now, I can be grateful for this. Right now, I'm breathing, and actually, I don't want to be breathing because this is so freaking painful. Mm-hmm. But it could be remembering all the good times, or it's so great that we had that experience together, or it's so great that I got to this, or I did this, or, thinking in the past. It's not so much in the future. It's just any little bit of hope that can get us started. And then as time goes on, time does heal, but it doesn't take away the pain in the same way. It doesn't reduce what's been going on, doesn't take it all away. But over time, if we can focus on those little things, so they start off as memories, then we can be happy about one thing or grateful about one thing. The more we can put into our life, the more that can grow. And as that grows, we can change our entire future.
And that's such a positive message for those people that are listening, that are supporting other people suffering as well, that they don't need rescuing. They don't need to be told it will get better, or you've got hope, or, today at least it's sunny, or as you say, at least you're breathing, because actually people just need to sit in their pain and they need acknowledgement. And actually, if you're listening, sometimes more encouraging words are, it is really hard. I hear what you're saying. I'm beside you. And actually just to sit with them in it rather than rescue.
Absolutely. And I think it can make such a difference. We don't need to heal the pain for them. We don't need to give them the perfect answer, but just to be there. And then at some point they might say, well, I'm grateful that you're there. That might be all that they've got. And it's just building on from these things. But the actual dark moments themselves can be so dark. But I so strongly believe that even when it's literally the worst thing ever and we really can't cope, that there is hope for a better future. There is hope that over time, as we connect to our moments, we start to adapt and make tiny changes in our lives, we can start to build whatever we want into our life.
Yeah. And as you say, there is always dark moments. And we'd love to get onto your 3 tools soon for how you like to make changes and live your life. But I'd like to go back into a little bit about when you were 12. You went through this life-changing experience. You had a near-death experience. That's a huge trauma to go through for anybody, and especially age 12. How did you find the positive moments? What did you find to be positive about at the time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I woke up out of my coma and I'd been given a little gift. I knew that everything was perfect with my life because I'd had this experience, and I know that other people don't necessarily get that, but I woke up and I knew I had a reason to live, because if I didn't, I would be dead, like I said earlier, and I knew that everything was going to be okay. So from that point on, it really was working out, how can I change this? And there were a lot of negative words. Doctors, they really just didn't want to say too much at all. they were very hesitant to say that I might walk again. They were hesitant to say anything because, it was so fresh after the surgery and the problem was still sitting there. So at that point, it really was just trying to find one little thing I could do. And I can remember I used to lie in the hospital on my bed and, I felt pretty sorry for myself quite a lot of the time. But my dad would come in and he would visit me during the day. He'd come in the mornings. And one day I just said to him, I'm going to get out of this mess. I'm going to get out of this. This is not the future that we want for me. Can you hold me accountable? And I'm going to show you one new thing that I can do every day. And at the time, it seemed so ridiculous because I couldn't do anything. I was paralysed in a bed. I couldn't do anything for myself. And through creating that thing between us, every day when he came in, I knew I had to do something new. And again, it was like, what can I find? Just like when you're in that dark moment, what can I find that's positive? For me there, what can I find that I could do that would be new? And it might be something really, really small, like I got through the nurses brushing my teeth with a sponge, something so tiny, or I got through another hour without breaking down, or I got through this, or I got through that. And it wasn't so much about me achieving anything new, but it was getting through something.
Mm-hmm.
And so those little moments became my celebration moments. And then when I started to do more and more and I started to get some movement back, it became more about what I could actually do rather than survive.
Yeah, do you know what I love about your story more than anything is that you were 12 years old and you had that tenacity there and then, the courage, the vulnerability, a different mindset than what a lot of people have at many different ages. And it proves to me that we should never underestimate our children, what they're capable of. They are so capable of thinking with such growth mindset. We should give them, more opportunities to do that. And good on you. I mean, what an amazing story. And I love the way you said moments of celebration as well, because I don't think as humans we celebrate enough. And people think we have to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries and promotions. Yeah, great, celebrate all that, but celebrate those tiny little moments in life. And as you say, you were there in a hospital bed, and to turn it into that terminology, little celebrations, it's a moment of joy rather than a moment of despair. You're finding the tiny little bits of joy through life, and I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely, because we can get really hung up on what we don't achieve or what we don't do or what's on our task list, especially as adults. But I think back then I didn't have an understanding of any of that. I had quite a resilient spirit because I was young. Being young really did help me in so many ways. It was also really hard because I was so dependent on people and I was right at a crucial age. So right at the age before you go into high school, here I am, I've got half a shaved head, I'm dribbling out the side of my mouth, I can't even walk, I'm in a wheelchair, different things like that. So in some ways it was a real crucial time in life with going on to making new friendships, entering into teenage years, all of the stuff that goes with that. But I think children, they have such resilient spirits and such fighting spirits because they haven't experienced the same things that as adults we experience. They haven't been worn down, is what some people would say. But, I'd love us to not get worn down, and I'd love us to learn all of these tips and tricks before our crisis moments happen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you quite a difficult question, in the sense that listeners might be in situations of abuse and they might be thinking it's all very well for me to go on my journey in positivity, but I'm living with negativity in my household. I'm living with somebody that's abusing me psychologically. And if I could get away from that and do all the things you say, I'd be fine. But I can't get away from coming home every day and being in an abusive relationship, having somebody being negative around me. And I can't escape because I've got young children. What would you say to that person that's looking to build a positive life, looking to be themselves in a place of positivity and gratitude, but they're brought down every day by what surrounds them?
And that's really tough. But again, in that situation, it's a very unique one as well, one which I haven't personally experienced. But I would say let's look for what is the thing that you can hang on to. So if you've got your children, can you build a stronger bond with your children through the experience that you're going through? Can you connect with yourself? Can you ask why you're going through this? This is happening because I need to learn something, or I believe very much that we come into life with a very specific purpose, and that the purpose comes to us and that we have to go through certain things to learn different things. So how can I connect to my purpose stronger? How could I connect to what's going on, maybe on a spiritual level? Could I get a stronger faith? Could I, there's so many different things that I think we can connect to. And it's about, again, not sitting there and suffering and say, okay, I got through that. But how can I use this situation to make me stronger? Or what good could come out of this? A lot of things, there's two sides of the coin. So there's the good stuff and the bad stuff, but how could we create more of the good in this situation? And I know that sounds really, really tough for people that are in that state of abuse, or, where they're feeling so trapped. But what, is there one thing, could they become stronger as a person? Could they connect with their kids more? There are different things, and I think a lot of it comes back to purpose. So yes, I have a very strong belief system, and maybe somebody in that situation could connect to either to God or to their higher self, or to something that's going on in their life that they could really, I don't know,
and
more good from.
As you say, there's a higher purpose for it. There's a reason that all things happen, and it might well be that they could also find support groups outside of the home, connect with people, join a church, as you say, join a young play group or a group with mums and babies, join a community centre, get some therapy or counselling without their partner knowing, or whatever it might be, but actually connect outside of the house and find support that's not in the home, find safe places outside so that they're safe and secure to do their work and journey. And it doesn't mean they need to do the journey when they're in the home. It might not be safe enough to do it, but it could mean doing it outside of the home within a safe support place, getting a counsellor once a month, or finding a group of people that will support them through it, but talking and being honest and being real about what's going on outside the home until it comes to a place or time that they can separate or find their own journey or path.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking more somebody who isn't able to get out there and trapped in so much abuse that they're stuck inside, but somebody who can get outside the house. There are so many connection points with people, or finding the things that gives you that little bit of joy. And it might be sitting at the park, it might be sitting at the beach, it might be just taking some time again to connect to the purpose, what's happening, but also the people. There's so many good things out there that we can go and find, but it's about living consciously, connecting to the moments, connecting to how we feel and why we do the things that we do.
And connection was just the main word in that entire conversation, wasn't it? That entire bit of it. It's all about connection, whether it's to yourself, whether it's to your feelings, whether it's to a higher source, whether it's to what you're doing, whether it's to your children, your family, whatever your passion, your purpose. It's all about connection. That's what we are here for. At the end of the day, we are here for love and connection, for no other reason. And the more we can connect with everything we feel and everything that's happening, the better, more enriched our life can be. So Kirsty, you are a remarkable human. I know that you still live with after effects of your brain injury and what's happened with you, but you're a podcaster, you're a public speaker, you're a coach, you're an author, you've achieved great things. You put together an amazing event at the beginning of the year, Hair Story, which was wonderful. When you set your mind to it, you definitely kick ass. You are a doer. You have such passion and purpose. You are a shining light. Give our listeners some tips and tools on how to do it, because you are a great example. So we want some of what you've got.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I think it comes back to, like I said, living consciously, the small bits of change, but never believing that you can't do something. Until you prove you can't do it, don't believe you can't do it. So there might be some things that you can't do. Me, I can't go out and I can't fly across the sky. Don't get me wrong, when I was young, I sure tried to do that. I had such a belief that if I jumped off our deck, I could fly. I honestly thought I could flap my arms and fly. I had to go through that. I know, it's a bit crazy, right? I had to go through that experience of proving to myself that I actually couldn't until I believed that I couldn't. And so whatever it is in our life, rather than starting off believing that we can't do something, or looking at other people and going, well, I couldn't do that. I love what they're doing, but I couldn't do that. Prove them wrong. Prove yourself wrong. Why can't you do it? Rather than going, I believe I can, and then having the heartbreak of realizing that actually you can't and your dreams are a bit too big. That's way better than believing that we can't. And so in that, it's understanding that, again, our circumstances, I believe we can have anything we want in our life, but we might not always believe that. So our current circumstances don't dictate what our future ones look like. So you want to be a movie star, go and follow it. If you want to, I don't know, write a book, go and do it. I never thought I could write a book. And when I wrote my book, I wrote it probably 10 times over because I keep forgetting that I'd written bits, and I go, I've got a new bit to add, and I'd rewrite it. And I'm like, oh, that's already in there. What a waste of energy. And then I'd do it again and again and again. And I went, I can't write a book. Who am I to think I can write a book? But over time, I got there. So it's understanding that sometimes things take time. It's the belief that we need to prove ourselves wrong rather than prove ourselves right. And the smallest things. So whatever it is we want to achieve, if we just make the smallest 1 degree of change over time, if you think 1 degree, if you get in a plane and the pilot says, oh, we're just 1 degree, of course, but don't worry, it'll be okay. It might be fine if you're going an hour and a half down the line in a flight. But if you're going on a long haul international flight, and here in New Zealand, our flights can get very, very long, up to like 36, 37 hours, you think 1 degree, of course, everything's going to change. When that plane lands, you're in a different climate, you've got a different currency, a different language, you've got different clothing that you need to wear. You've got so many different elements to what you thought you were going towards. And it's the same in our life. If we can just create that 1 degree of change and sustain it over a long period of time. And that might be something so small like getting out of bed 1 minute earlier. Getting out of bed 1 minute earlier for a week, and then the next week get out of bed 2 minutes earlier for a week, and then 3 minutes earlier for a week. And over time, we find that we have more time in our day because we're rushing around going, I'm so tired, I'm so busy. Using that time to work towards writing a book, or using that time to meditate or to connect with people, send the emails that you say you want to connect with a lot of different people, but you don't have time. Start to create the time. But it's not getting up 3 hours earlier in the morning. It's creating that time out of what we already have, that 1 degree of change, and sustaining it over a longer period of time. So I'm very much about connecting, creating change, believing that we can do anything until we prove it that we can't. And yeah, habits are a really big thing for me. We do things day in and day out, and it's understanding why we do them. Why do we choose to work this way? Why do we do what we do? And if we can connect with that and break it down, then we can start to understand how we can change our future. What is that thing that we need to compound into our life? If we've got a place we want to go to, what does that very smidgen of a first step look like? Rather than jumping straight in, failing and feeling, oh, I'm not good enough. Let's celebrate when we can achieve that tiniest little action.
I love the fact you're talking about tiny steps, because I think the greatest piece of advice I was given was that, Sue, you can do this journey in 10 years, or you could do this journey in a year. Where do you want to be in a year? And if you can make the small changes today, then in a year you will have changed your life around. And I love also the fact that you say you can do anything you want to do, and you wanted to fly, but you knew you couldn't fly. And this morning on the news, on the radio, I heard that the Cumbrian Ambulance Rescue Service in the UK are sending mountain rescue workers up with jetpacks, and they can get them to the top of the mountain in 30 seconds. So for those people that think they can't fly, get yourself a jetpack and you can.
Because that's just changing the way that we do it. It's changing the thinking. What does flying look like? It doesn't necessarily look how we think it is. Let's get a bit creative and tweak that slightly. That sounds really fun. I'd quite like to try that.
I think the only things we can't do are the things where our mind says we can't, because you can do the things when you say you can, and you can't do the things when you say you can't. So it's changing your mindset again.
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite quotes that I have, is whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Because whatever we think is what will happen. So connecting to our moments, understanding we can change them. How do we change them? Let's change our thinking and belief that we can do a whole lot more than we thought we could.
Kirsty, your positivity is infectious. As Jo says, we all want a bit of what you've got. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible inspiration, your wisdom, your insight, and also your own journey that you've walked through, because you can't, in saying that we all want what you've got, we wouldn't probably all want to go through what you went through. So you've got what you've got because you've lived through it. You've journeyed through it and been conscious and aware, as you've talked about. So thank you that you've been courageous enough to be vulnerable in your circumstances and to go on that path and journey so that you can share with us all you've shared today. Thank you for joining us.
And Kirsty, just one quick question. Where can our listeners find you?
Pretty easy to find me, actually. So I've got kirstysalisbury.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm all over the place, actually. I do quite a lot of different things. I'm not somebody who can settle into one thing. So if you Google my name, I'm going to jump up. You're going to find me. But yeah, KirstySalisbury.com is probably the best place to get in touch with me.
And what's the name of your podcast?
I've got two. One is Let's Talk Life Design. So that's all about overcoming crisis moments. But my main focus is Let's Talk Near Death, which is interviewing other near-death experiences, talking about experiences between life, death and beyond. And that is probably my favourite part of my work that I do.
Beautiful. We will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.